Good day, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Happy to welcome Alexrandra Levit, a best-selling author and journalist who focuses on the future of work. So let's just kick it right off. Do you think that Facebook addiction is a growing problem? And if so, why or why not?
Well, David, I do think it's a growing problem. I do think also that it's more than just Facebook. Smartphone addiction is probably the bigger concern. And it's regardless of whether you have an app or social network of choice, most people are chained to their devices and literally can't go more than a few minutes without looking at them. And what this means, why it matters, is that we aren't fully present for the people in our lives, for the responsibilities in our lives. And therefore, it can be difficult to assess what's really meaningful because we're just so busy looking at those phones all the time. And so I think it's not just Facebook, but smartphones in general.
Are you seeing the technology addiction also creep into the workplace? And how is that hurting productivity and the creativity of people who are trying to focus on meaningful work?
Yeah, David, it's because people can't help it. We're in the habit of checking these sites several times a day. It's almost like a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. It's also so much easier to mindlessly read and post on social networks than to get busy doing tasks that you're getting paid for. And these are the tasks that require concentration and hard work. Our attention spans, unfortunately, are shorter than ever, and all it takes is one little ping from a phone to derail an entire morning's professional efforts. So yes, that's a long answer to absolutely we see it creeping into the workplace.
Okay. Do you see these addictions impacting millennials specifically in the workplace? Is there any difference between generations?
Absolutely. Millennials are by far the most negatively impacted right now because they've never been in the workplace without these tech-based distractions. They don't even know how to operate without them. And in particular, when we look at the traits of millennials, and of course, these are based on research, but aren't true for every individual, we have to recognize we are making some generalizations, but they do tend to be more comfortable interacting with others via technology instead of in person. And they tend to use technology as a crutch for difficult or stressful situations or situations where they might be dealing with a conflict. So the addiction just becomes worse when it makes it easier to get out of a hard situation.
So what would be the long-term ramifications of this kind of addiction for that generation?
Well, the long-term ramifications, David, are that the interpersonal skills of millennials are going to continue to weaken. This obviously has implications for their professional success. From a more general perspective, we've seen that technology addiction negatively impacts mental health, physical health, in a variety of ways. And at least the millennials, when we look at them, they've spent most of their childhoods outside this environment. Where I am actually more concerned is for the younger generation, the generation that will be graduating college starting this year in 2018. They're known as Generation Z, and they have spent most of their childhoods in these tech-based environments. So I think we're going to see the ramifications for them be even more significant than for the millennials.
What do you think about making the work environment more productive and satisfying? What kind of suggestions would you have?
This is a big question for sure. And organizations, first of all, need to do a better job at communicating the big picture of what they stand for and allowing individual workers to establish goals that contribute to that mission. We call this bottom-up goal setting, where you're not just told from above what you need to be focusing on, but you actually have an active role in determining what you're going to work on at the office that's going to positively contribute to the bottom line. And individuals need to be given the freedom to accomplish tasks how, where, and when they want to. So that's through flexible work usually. And they should also be encouraged to make use of in-person human collaboration wherever possible. Because as we look at the value that human beings are going to add in a world that's increasingly automated, we have to look at things like empathy, diplomacy, selling, teaming, leadership. And these are all traits that humans uniquely have that can't so easily be taken over by machines. And they are things that are best suited to in-person environments. So while we can use technology to interact with people who might be in different time zones, on different continents even, we also need to recognize that there's a time and a place. And sometimes it's better to establish rapport and to build relationships and to get work done when you're in person.
With the growing amount of information being brought in with app overload, how can knowledge workers best make quiet time for the deep work they need to do? You mentioned before some of the things you suggested for consumers. But in the workplace, what distractions do they need to eliminate, and how can we mitigate some of these interruptions?
Well, I'm sure it's a surprise to no one, but the distractions are mostly technological in nature. And if you allow it to happen, you could be interrupted by a notification, that little ping every few seconds. So very simply put, knowledge workers need to step away from their devices. Literally, I suggest that people put them in a purse, in a drawer, even in another room, and to commit to working continuously on a single task for at least an hour. I suggest don't just show up at work and let the day carry you away. You have to be strategic about how you spend your time. And this means planning your weeks in advance, setting key deliverables for every day. And of course, you have to leave cushion room for emergencies and unforeseen circumstances. These things are going to come up. Also, when you're meeting with someone, be mentally present. Put your devices away. Focus all your attention and energy on the conversation at hand, on the individual in front of you. Unless it's absolutely necessary, try not to multitask when you're on a conference call or, God forbid, when you're on a one-on-one call with someone. Because when you try to focus on too many things at once, you inevitably don't focus on anything. And so by taking away that distraction, it won't be as tempting. So just get into the habit of not even having your phone next to you when you're in one of these situations where it requires intense focus and concentration.
Do you think paradoxically technology can help alleviate too much technology? So new advances, maybe AI, productivity tools might help reduce information overload and tech addiction?
Yeah, David, this is a great question. And I think the answer is yes. And to start with, there are time tracking applications like Rescue Time. That's one of my personal favorites. Tells you exactly where you're spending the hours of the day, even if a particular day is more or less productive than average. I find myself getting competitive, and I look at Rescue Time at the end of the day, and if it tells me I'm 30% less productive than I usually am, I'm going to amp up my efforts after dinner, after my kids go to bed, to make sure that I'm back on track, because I don't like when I compete with myself and I'm not doing as well. So it gives you some internal motivation. The Harmony app is a great example of leveraging something new called topic computing, which you're familiar with, but some of our listeners might not be, breaking down data silos from business applications and grouping information by topics. And what this does is it surfaces the information that's most important to knowledge workers, what they need to be thinking about at any given time versus just having a mass of data that doesn't seem to tie together in any meaningful way.
Great. Is there anything that you'd like to add that I didn't ask that on this topic?
I would just say that whenever we're considering, this is an issue that is crucial to workplace productivity. And I think sometimes it goes by the wayside. Everyone just assumes, well, we're tied to our devices. The devices are just a part of life. And we don't pay attention to the fact that actually there's a serious negative impact on productivity, on happiness, on feeling like you're contributing something worthwhile. And so this is a problem that needs to be addressed. And actually, sometimes the solutions are very simple, as we've talked about today. It's just having the forethought to step away from the device and realize that you do need focused time and focused concentration to feel like you've achieved your potential and that you've done something positive for your organization.
Okay, Alexrandra Levit, thank you very much for your time, and it was a pleasure speaking with you today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, David. It's great to be here.